Today, let's take a look at 1983's cult horror classic Mausoleum, shall we? As the movie opens, we meet a little girl, Susan, and her aunt Cora. Susan is upset that her mother has recently passed away.
No, Aunt Cora. I'm staying with Mommy.
Please, honey, I know you're upset, but I don't want you to stay out here and catch cold. My house.
The two argue for a while. Susan doesn't want to go home with Cora. Susan then runs off for some reason like a little dumbass.
It's time to go.
I won't go in there. I won't. No, Aunt Cora, I won't.
Susan! Susan, wait!
Cora is evidently completely helpless. She just watches as Susan runs off at a leisurely pace while Cora simply stands there and screams for her.
Please, not Susan!
Something across the way then calls to Susan. It's a mausoleum, with what I suspect is some superimposed fog and rain. Susan then approaches the mausoleum, which now has much less smoke and no evidence of any rain. A big donut on the gate explodes, and logically Susan then proceeds to go inside the mausoleum. Dramatically she proceeds inside. We are now treated to the Dario Argento sequence of the film. Sorry, wrong movie. Now we get our first glimpse of what will be a recurring theme in this film, green eyes. Also, just what in the hell is that guy doing in the background? Seriously, what the hell, man? In case you're wondering who that man is with the toupee on fire, that is the groundskeeper. He went down there to see what that little girl was doing in the mausoleum. I only know this because I heard it on the commentary for the film. At this point you may be asking yourself what in the world is going on. Well, it's quite simple. Susan is releasing the Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
Now here come the Stan Winston creature effects, looking quite nice, I may add. Now, it's 10 years later and Aunt Cora is talking to psychiatrist Dr. Simon Andrews about Susan.
I'm not responsible, Sam. Oh, no. I told them how they...
Sorry, wrong movie.
Show it to
It's revealed that there is something supernatural about their family, and her father kept a diary on the subject. First off, men keep journals, not diaries, journals. Get it right. Cora feels like Susan is acting like her sister did right before she died 10 years ago. She wants Simon to read the diary, I mean journal, for some reason because she thinks he can help. What does psychiatry have to do with demonic possession? Wouldn't a priest be a better person to turn to for help with issues of demonic possession?
The Holy Spirit corrupt you.
was made that has to be made. And the 70 disciples returned again.
No stigma has ever received before.
ideal in reality.
The more important question is, who in the hell was the cinematographer for this movie? I mean, come on, look at this shit. Susan, now an adult and sexy as a playmate, goes back to the cemetery to visit her mother's grave. While there, she has flashbacks to when she was there 10 years earlier. On a side note, what about the guy whose head exploded? Was there ever any sort of investigation on that? Just wondering. Susan then goes to the mausoleum and turns green as Dr. Simon reads us some exposition explaining what is happening, as if we didn't already know she is being possessed. In the next scene, Susan is back home with her husband Oliver, with no recollection of how she got there. The highlight of this scene is the groundskeeper, who is unnecessarily creepy for no reason at all. I mean, come on, look at this creeper, what the hell? But you got to love it. The two go out for a night on the town at the disco dinner. They eat, drink and dance. Later, Susan is harassed by a drunk man while her husband is called away for a conveniently placed phone call.
What the hell's wrong with her?
After dinner, Susan sees the man who harassed her. She then proceeds to blow him up in his car with her patented green eyes. We are then treated to the visual delight of the creeper groundskeeper Ben, rubbing his belly as he eavesdrops on Susan's conversation with her housemaid. To be completely honest, I'm not really sure what is going on in this section of the film, but it would appear that the demon inside of Susan is threatened by Ben. I mean, who wouldn't be? Look at this guy. We as the audience then watch Ben go about what is most likely his normal daily routine around the house. We get to witness Ben putting mulch on a tree, cutting grass that has already been cut, taking a break while drinking beer as he sits on a swing, taking a nap, and then lastly, sharpening an axe that he has dulled down by chopping the log most of the day for no real reason other than to be in Susan's line of sight. As Ben is back at working dulling his axe down in the yard, Susan decides to expose herself to Ben from her balcony as he chops at a log in the front yard with no real purpose other than to be able to sharpen the axe again the next day, thus continuing his cycle. Several hours later, an ecstatic Ben comes to discover that Susan wants to have sex with him. Ben is then led into Susan's garage where they have sex, and Ben is shortly thereafter murdered due to Susan's green eyes. This is the first time we see the real demon inside of Susan, and I have to admit it is quite satisfying. Not a whole lot is revealed, but it's enough to satisfy. Oliver soon comes home to find a horny Susan by the fireplace, and they have sex. The next morning, Oliver wakes up and Susan is cooking him breakfast, but he has to go to work and has no time to eat. And Cora comes by to visit Susan, or I think it's Aunt Cora. The focus is a bit off in this movie, and sometimes it's hard to tell exactly what you're seeing on screen. Cora proceeds to go upstairs only to discover Susan is now a demon. This is by far the best scene in the movie and worth the price of admission alone. The demon levitates Aunt Cora and pulls her spine out of her chest in a bloody display of might. This demon form of Susan is a real bitch. Pulling one's spine out of their chest isn't a very Christian thing to do at all.
I've been thinking about you all day.
That night, Oliver has Susan for dinner and wakes up in the middle of the night and sees Susan sitting in a rocking chair. He is so startled by seeing Susan in a rocking that he calls Simon. He proceeds to tell Simon that it wasn't Susan in the rocking chair. Again, why would he call Simon for this? Who the hell is Simon, and why does everyone go to him for their supernatural questions? Simon agrees to see Susan the next day. But wouldn't Simon want to see Oliver instead? At this point in the movie, wouldn't Simon think that Oliver is the one with the mental issue, not Susan? Oliver just said that his wife wasn't his wife. As Susan sleeps, she has a dream about all her victims, and we see glimpses of various demon footage. For the first time we see what I think is Susan's mom in her demon vision, but it's not too clear what's going on here. In the morning, Oliver asks the housemaid, Elsie, to keep a special eye on Susan while he's out to work. Elsie hints that she may not be here when he gets back and says there are spiritual matters going on. Elsie goes upstairs and notices green fog coming from Susan's room. Elsie decides to drink some of the good stuff to calm her nerves. She then goes back upstairs. The fog is still there. She opens the door and shortly after decides she has seen enough and leaves the house forever. Sometime later, Oliver convinces Susan to go see Simon. Susan doesn't want to go, but she agrees to go see him since Oliver wants her to. Susan says something about Simon wanting to see her for a checkup. It's implied that Susan used to or still does see Simon on a regular basis, but Simon and Susan's relationship is never really explained. When they jump 10 years into the future, they seem to have left quite a gap in the story. Susan goes to see Simon, and one thing stands out more than anything else. The curtains match the wallpaper pattern. Maybe it's just me, but that just seems like poor set design, or at the very least poor interior design skills.
Then will you do something for me?
What's that?
Will you let me try hypnosis?
Simon, that stuff's nonsense.
If it were nonsense, I would.
During a session of hypnosis, Simon witnesses the partial demon in Susan, with green eyes and rotten dentures. Throughout the movie so far, Susan's green eyes have been created by superimposing a green blur over her eyes. In this scene she is wearing actual contacts, and they look great. Bobby Bresci, the actress playing Susan, has stated that she wore those contacts for such long periods of time that for much of the filming she was all but blind. Wouldn't be ashamed to go blind and have this film to show for it. After the session, Simon calls a friend to help him make sense of what has just happened. You would think he would turn to a demonologist or a priest, but nah, that makes way too much sense. A man comes to Susan's house and drops off a plant. Susan comes to the door with her breast hanging out and says she didn't order the plant, and offers to let the man inside to call his office and correct the problem as she fondles herself in front of him.
Why don't you come in?
Once inside the house, the man begins to grope Susan, probably because she was basically wrapping him with her eyes earlier. She tells the man to stop and call the office first, then to go upstairs. The man calls the office as Susan takes on her demon form. The man starts bleeding from his ears, and then his right eye falls out of his head and lands in his hand for some reason. Oliver comes home as Susan is up in the attic, which is full of cobwebs, looking through a trunk which has a green glow coming from it. Oliver finds a telephone with blood all over it and calls out for Susan. He asks if she is hurt. The phone has blood all over it and he is acting like he just found a used tampon. On the wall we get a subtle reference to Satan. Why is that on the wall? Really? Why? Susan comes down and Oliver wants to talk to her about Simon. She refuses and walks off, stating she is too drained to talk about that now. Now Simon and his doctor friend discuss what is happening to Susan in some of the worst framed scenes ever. In short, Simon now believes that Susan is posed and that the old way to save her is to get a crown of thorns from the mausoleum and put them on her head, which is the solution mentioned is Susan's dad's dairy. There was another plan on the table too, but Oliver wouldn't go for it, to confine Susan to a mental asylum. That plan wouldn't really fix anything, it would be more like putting the problem somewhere out of sight.
I've been assisting Dr.
To drive home that point that the Demon Susan isn't a very nice person now, and to show more gore, Demon Susan kills an art dealer at the mall that was trying to stop her from stealing a piece on artwork.
5 o'clock. What are you doing in bed?
Oliver confronts Susan, asking her what is wrong with her. Susan denies anything is wrong and says she is fine. As proof that something is wrong, Oliver then picks up the picture that Susan recently stole and says,
There's nothing wrong with me.
Honey, there is something wrong with you. Look at this. What is this? What the hell's going on here? What is this, huh? There's something wrong with you.
That painting may prove that Susan has horrible taste in art, but it doesn't prove much more than that. I'm sure there is some sort of significance to that painting, but I'll be damned if I know what the hell it is. Oliver and Susan have a fight over some broken dishes, leaving Oliver speechless. In another part of town, Simon is seen driving as he listens to the audio recording he made of his session with Susan. A much more approachable Susan makes out with Oliver as she takes a bath. If you look up, you will find proof that yes, Susan does indeed have horrible taste in art. I've stared in that painting now quite some time and still have no idea what the hell it is. Meanwhile, Simon arrives at the mausoleum and grabs the crown of thorns from the gate. Unfortunately for Oliver, Susan turns into a demon while they are making out, and to add further complication to matters, so do both her breasts. It appears that her breasts eat a hole in Oliver's chest. Classic demon move. Simon arrives at Susan's house with the crown of thorns in hand and searches throughout the house looking for Susan. After he strolls around the house for an hour or so, he finds Oliver's dead body in the bathtub. Hearing a scream from upstairs, Simon slowly strolls upstairs with no sense of urgency to the cobweb attic to find Susan sitting in front of a radioactive chest. The two exchange some pointless dialogue, which climaxes with Susan turning into a demon after Simon places the crown of thorns on her head. I thought the crowns of thorns would have the opposite effect. Susan turns into a demon with a slow series of transitional swipes, much like that of The Wolf Man from 1941. This scene really lingers forever. They really wanted to showcase the demon's transformation. This isn't a transformation, this is a transformation. After the filmmakers were satisfied with the demon's screen time, Susan falls to the floor and the demon vanishes from her body and is sent back to the mausoleum. Simon and Susan go to mausoleum to finish the demon off. Simon tells Susan she knows what has to be done. I don't know why she would know what has to be done, because no one has told her at the point. She has no idea what is going on with her.
Simon, I don't understand.
There's a lot I have to explain to you, Susan.
Despite the facts, Susan places the crown of thorns on the demon's stomach and the demon goes back into its coffin without a struggle at all. Now comes the most bizarre scene of the movie, which is saying quite a bit, because we've already seen demon breast. Simon takes Susan to his car, then walks back toward the mausoleum and talks to a cloaked figure.
You've known the secret and lived with it, like your father before you, and his father before him. Remember, no one goes into the mausoleum. No one.
Simon sure is making a lot of assumptions about this person. When the camera pulls back, we see that the cloaked figure is the gardener Ben. What does this mean? Is it Ben? Is it a demon? Is it an angel? Or is it just the groundskeeper dressed like a monk? Why does he look so sinister? Simon was talking to him like he was trying to protect people from the mausoleum, yet here he is with most diabolical laugh ever seen on screen.